As we've noted, we've seen repeated calls for Western journalists to be allowed into Gaza as the war approaches its 2-year mark. Just talk about, tell our viewers why that is so important to have Western journalists there to observe what is going on the ground throughout the war, and what the reaction has been and the justification when you reach out to the Israeli government demanding as much.
Well, one of the points is we should trust Palestinian journalists as well, but there's, profound sort of racism, and the Israeli government has basically said if you're Palestinian, you're not to be trusted, whereas I think the foreign press, the press in general, are now beginning to learn that whatever the Israeli government says has to be taken with a hundredweight of salt, because there's what they say bears no relation to reality. And they use keywords like, the Hamas Ministry of Defense. Frankly, I don't care whether a-Sharif was in Hamas or not. We don't kill journalists for being Republicans or Democrats or in Britain Labour Party. Hamas is a political organization as well as a terrorist organization, perhaps. But it's not permissible to go killing people. And this was the distinct change now, is the IDF actually boasted that this was a targeted killing. And the reason they're doing that is they're not letting foreign journalists in. So Palestinian journalists are the only ones who are there, the only ones who can tell what's happening there. And what they're saying completely contradicts what's coming from Israeli spokesmen in Israel and across the world. It's quite clear they've documented the ongoing massacres, and the Israelis don't like it.
What do you mean by not caring whether Anas al-Sharif was part of Hamas? Because the Israelis have produced what they say is evidence and have longstanding statements where they say he was not only part of Hamas, but he was leading a Hamas cell. In your view, that doesn't make him fair game for Israeli targets?
Well, first of all, I don't believe it. He's been working 24 hours on journalism. He doesn't have time to work in a cell on the side. The second point is I basically don't believe anything the Israeli government says about this. They've lied and lied and lied. They buried a whole medical team after denying it. They went and destroyed the evidence. They bombed hospitals, claiming there were Hamas facilities underneath, which weren't there. And the only way to conclusively disprove them was to let foreign journalists in, and they won't do that. So now they're basically saying if foreign journalists are allowed in now, I would make sure they compose their wills before they go.
These are two separate.
The IDF has no compunction.
These are two separate issues you raise. I think the majority of journalists around the world, and I would imagine a lot of our viewers, would support allowing Western journalists into Gaza to see for themselves and report for themselves what is happening in this war. But when you say you don't believe a word Israel is saying, there's been a lot of accusation thrown at Israel for not producing evidence to confirm some of the claims they've made. If they then produce evidence and you say, I don't believe it, where does that leave things?
Well, it leaves things. We work on the balance of proof. Our job is to challenge authority. The authority here is denying access to independent witnesses. Nobody else is allowed to go into Gaza. International organizations aren't allowed into Gaza. Journalists aren't allowed into Gaza. Reuters, AP, CNN, BBC are not allowed into Gaza. Now, what does that give us? Sort of more than a little hint that things are going on there that the Israeli government doesn't want you to know about or doesn't want you to witness. What other conclusion are you going to give? There's a presumption in favor of Israel in a lot of this, which is totally unjustified after recent experience. I think, they've targeted journalists before, in the West Bank as well, by the way. We're looking at Gaza, but journalists have been assaulted and killed in the West Bank as well for witnessing what the settlers are doing, let alone what the IDF is doing. So I think we're really, it doesn't do Israel any great favors for basically making everything they say totally questionable.